right, a reading from Exodus chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. Listen to the word of the Lord. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we will join our enemies' fight against us and leave the country." This is the word of the Lord.
Today we are talking about deliverance. Deliverance. I need to be delivered of something. I need to be delivered of these glasses. This week I was, just doing my weekly thing and, went to bed and woke up the next morning and the temple of my glasses were broke. So I'm like, I can't see anything. So I started hunting or put them on and with a broke temple and started running around the house looking for a temple or looking for an old pair of glasses, and I found them. Problem is, the reading part of these glasses are not as strong as they need to be. Hence, Rebecca read the word for us this morning because I couldn't see it out of the scriptures. But we all need to be delivered from something. Some things are more important than others, but we all need to be delivered from something. Now, I'm going to tell you a story here. Hopefully we can, there we go, about a Chicago lawyer. You ever had one of those, a good Chicago lawyer? Now, if you know anybody that's a Chicago lawyer, well, just change that to whatever city. But there was this Chicago lawyer, and he came out to meet this Iowa farmer. And he came out and he said, "You know what? I come out here today and I'm going to take all of your land. I'm going to, we're just going to, I'm a Chicago lawyer. I'm going to use the law. I'm going to take your land and it's going to be mine. And then I'm going to build a nice house on it." And the old farmer said, Oh, really? That's what you think you're going to do? You think you're just going to come out here and steal my land, do you? And the Chicago lawyer said, No, I'm not going to steal it. I'm going to take it by rule of law. And the little Iowa farmer, he said, "Well, you know what? We've got our own rules and our own law out here. And, let's decide this by Iowa farmer law." And the Chicago lawyer thought about it for a minute, and he thought, well, I'm a lawyer. What could be so? Okay, we'll decide it by Iowa farm law. Not knowing what that meant, he should have probably have found out. So the old Iowa farmer got up off his tractor, and he said, "Okay, this is how it works. I'm going to go first. I hit you 3 times. And then you'll get to hit me 3 times, and I'll hit you 3 times, and you can hit me 3 times. And the first one to give up wins. The other person wins." The lawyer said, "Okay, that sounds fair. I don't really want to get hit, but we're in this is your home, so we'll play by the home court rules. So, you can go first. So the old Iowa farmer, he doubled up his fist and he hauled off and he hit him as hard as he could. And the guy just kind of staggered, but he didn't fall down. And he goes, wow, you got a good punch. And he goes, yeah, and I got 2 more coming. So he takes it, wham, hits him again. And this time the old Chicago lawyer, he hits the ground and he kind of stumbles and gets up. And then he goes, okay, you got 1 more left. Give me your best shot. And he just hits him with all he's got and knocks him out, and he's out for a couple of seconds, laying on the ground, just he's just out, not cold. Finally, he comes to, gets up, and he goes, oh, well, it's my turn. And he goes, the farmer says, you know what? I give up. What's the point of that? I have no idea, but it was a good story. Sometimes you just got to have a fun story. But this farmer needed to be delivered from this Chicago lawyer. And we all have things that we need to be delivered from. Like I need to be delivered from this dumb whatever this thing is, because either the batteries are not strong enough, or I don't know how to use it, or a combination thereof. But I'm going to say it's the batteries need to be replaced. But we all have something that we need to be delivered from. And God's new nation, the God of Israel, this new nation that had just been formed, was in danger of being annihilated by the Egyptians. God's new nation is in danger of being annihilated. So think about this for a minute. When you come to the end of Genesis, and you read the last verse of Genesis, and it says, so Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. That's Genesis chapter 50, verse 26. And you think, well, you know what? I got through Genesis. I think I'm going to start Exodus. And then you start reading from Exodus chapter 1. You flip a couple of pages, and then you read, these are the names of the sons of Israel. And it goes through that whole... When you turn those few pages, you have turned 400 years of history in those few pages. And in those turning of the few pages and the 400 years passing, Israel grew. They were blessed and they increased in number. And to the point where they probably had a couple of million people maybe. Counting women, children, men, everybody, they probably had at least 1 million people. And the Egyptians started to see this increase of the Israelites and said, wait a minute, they're starting to get a whole lot of these folks in here, and if we don't do something, they're going to become dangerous to us because they will side with our enemies and we will lose. So Pharaoh decides he's going to put a heavy burden on the Egyptians, the Egyptians are going to put a heavy burden on the Israelites. And they started to they made them slaves because this new Pharaoh didn't know anything about Joseph. And they had this heavy burden, and they had to make their bricks. Maybe this is how they carried their bricks. I don't know. But they had to make bricks, and not only did they have to make bricks, but then they had to find their straw to help them make the bricks. So they basically had their workload doubled, because even though they had to go out and find their straw and make their bricks, the Pharaoh said, no, you're not going to get a reduction in how many bricks you make just because you have to now go out and find your own straw. Because it used to be the Egyptians would bring them the straw, and then they would do the harder labor of making the bricks. But now the Egyptians weren't even going to bring them the straw. They would have to go out and get the straw and make the bricks. And this happened for years and years and years. And finally, God sends a deliverer. Now, do you think these 400 years of slavery took God by surprise? Do you think that God didn't know what the Israelites were going through at the hands of the Egyptians? In fact, if you go back to Genesis chapter 15 and read verses 12 to 14, you'll find that God actually prophesied this to the people of Israel, that one day that there would be 400 years time period where they would be slaves. It says, as the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep. This is Genesis 15. And a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country, Egypt, not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. And that's exactly what they were. And then it goes on and says, but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves. And afterwards they will come out with great possessions. That's Genesis 15, 12 to 24. And that's exactly what happened. Because God wasn't caught by surprise of what the Israelites were going through. And you might be going through a situation where you need deliverance too. And know that God has not been surprised by your circumstances either. God knows the situation you're in, and he wasn't surprised. He knew that this was going to come about, and he knew he was going to come up beside you and carry you and give you grace and even deliver you from these things that are weighing you down, making your heart heavy, making you have to grieve. The things that you need deliverance from, God knew that you were going to go through these, and that he was going to be your firm foundation, that foundation that gives you strength to stand when nothing else, you feel like you can't do anything else but stand. And that's what Paul tells us to do. When we can't do anything else but stand, then stand firm and wait for your deliverance. Now, sometimes deliverance doesn't come the way we want it to come. Sometimes it comes in strange ways. Sometimes it comes in the form of burning bushes. And if I could get the next slide. And sometimes in these burning bushes, God reveals himself and who he is. And God reveals himself to Moses in 3 different ways, and you can see them on the screen here. He reveals himself in his name, by his power, and by his plan. God has a name, God has power, and God has a plan. So what's God's name? How did he reveal himself to Moses? He revealed himself as Yahweh. Yahweh. God reveals his name as Yahweh. I am. Because these Israelites, when Moses was talking to God God was coming out of this burning bush, and the voice was coming out of the burning bush, and the bush wasn't consumed. This voice came out, and Moses heard it, and he was speaking to him, and he says, you want me to do what? You want me to go back and lead these people? They're going to say, who do you think you are, Moses? You lived in the palace all these years. You're not one of us. If anything, you're one of them. How is he? And he said, these people are going to ask, how do we know that you have heard from God? They're going to ask, what's God's name then if you're so smart? Because see, names were important in this time period. Your name is important. Now, how many of you know what your name means? You know what your name. Jim and I we have good ones, because James is the root of Jim or Jimmy, and James means king. You don't have to bow down. That's all right. We won't go that far. But Jimmy means king. Philip, on the other hand, is just a lover of horses. Big deal. So he works in a stable. Who cares? It stinks there. But see, in the Old Testament, the names meant something. So when God says, I am, he's trying to tell these people something. You see, the Egyptians had the god of Re. Ray, don't get a big head. It's actually the god of Ra, but anyway, sometimes we pronounce it Ray. Anyway, this was the god of the sun. It was a sun god. They worshipped the sun, okay? And basically, they were saying with Ra or Ray, they would say it was that god was saying, "I am the god of sun." And different gods would say, I am the god of this, or I am the god of that, I am the god of the moon. So they had these I ams. And so Moses asked God, well, who do you say you are? What God are you? Are you the God of the sun, like the Egyptians? Are you the God of the land? And God just says, I am. He's saying, I'm the God of everything. I'm not just the God of the sun. I'm not just the God of the moon. I'm not just the God of the land. I am the God of everything. And this was very, very important, because not only was names important, but when God started to prove that they were the true God, they did it through power. They did it through power. So God reveals himself that he is a God of power. And how did he do this? How did gods reveal themselves as being the strongest? Well, God started to use the 10 plagues. Remember the 10 plagues in Exodus? You had the plague of the flies, the plague of the frogs, the boils, the waters turning the blood. I mean, these were terrible gnats everywhere. I mean, they were just terrible, nasty plagues that caused distress within Israel, or within Egypt. And of course, every time these things happened to Egypt, they didn't happen to Israel, because God was protecting them. God was showing his power until finally he shows his utmost power by killing all of the firstborn of Egypt. And the way that God said we will deliver the children of Israel is by putting blood on the doorpost of your house. And when the death angel comes over to take the firstborn of all of Egypt, whether it be the firstborn of cattle, the sheep, whatever, and even the firstborn of humanity, you will be safe because of the blood that's going to cover the doorpost of your hearts, or the doorpost of your houses. Take a lamb that is perfect, that's a year old, doesn't have any spots, doesn't have any blemishes, doesn't have any broken bones. I want you to sacrifice that lamb. I want you to cook it. I want you to eat it. I want you to eat it while you're standing up, so that you're ready to go in a moment's notice. And take that blood and put it on the doorpost of your house. And when the death angel comes, he'll pass over you. And it won't destroy your firstborn. It won't take the firstborn of your cattle. It won't take the firstborn of your sheep. It won't take the firstborn that you call son. You will be delivered from these plagues. You see, God had a plan. This wasn't just an arbitrary thing that happened. What is God doing? Why did he do all these plagues? This doesn't make any sense. To the Egyptians, to the Israelites, it made perfect sense. They were getting delivered. They didn't really think about far off and how this was going to affect people in 2018. They didn't really care. All they wanted to know was, do I have to go get straw anymore? No. Do I have to make bricks anymore? No. Okay, I'm in this plan. I'll roast the lamb, I'll put the blood over it, and I will be delivered. But God had a bigger plan. That would be the lower story plan. The plan of, I'm going to get out of here, I'm going to get out from under the thumb of the Egyptians, and I'm going to be delivered. But see, there was an upper story plan that was going on as well. You see, without this deliverance, when Jesus comes into ministry, and John the Baptist says of him when he sees him walking up as he's baptizing people in the Jordan River, and he says, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Without the deliverance of Israel from Egypt, that statement makes no sense. What does that mean? Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Without Moses and the deliverance of the people of Israel, it doesn't make any sense. But with it, it makes perfect sense, because that is how God covered the children of Israel with his grace, by the blood being applied and the lamb being sacrificed. And that's what's going to happen as well. God has a plan, and he has a plan for your life as well. And he has the power to deliver you from the things that you need to be delivered from. He has the power. He has a plan. Whose God is the most powerful? That was another question that came about. Well, in the Old Testament, power was decided, the true God was decided by whose God was the most powerful. And there was nothing that these Egyptians could do. Oh, sure, they tried they were able to do some of the things, like if I took Gary's walking stick, or better yet, if Moses took Gary's walking stick, threw it down on the ground, it turned to what? Snake. It turned to a snake. And then he would pick it up by the tail. Now, how many of you know how to pick up a snake? Do you pick up a snake by its tail? No, because if you pick up a snake by its tail, what is it going to do? It's going to curl around and bite you, but that's exactly what Moses was told to do. Do you trust me, Moses? Yeah, God, I do. Okay, then pick up that snake by the tail. No, it'll bite me. No, pick up the snake by its tail. You just seen this piece of wood turn into a snake, so you might have enough faith to go ahead and pick up that snake by the tail, and it turned back into what? It turned back into a stick, right? Moses went into Egypt to Pharaoh, threw a stick down on the ground, it turned into a snake. What happened? Pharaoh calls in his magicians, and he says, "You boys better be able to do this." The magician said, "Are you kidding? This is easy." They threw their sticks down on the ground. What happened? They turned into snakes. And if I remember right, see, this is where I need to get my details together. I need to read this story as well to remember these details. But if I remember right, Moses' snake devoured the other snakes.
That's how it was in the movie.
That's how it was in the movie. That's what Charlton Heston. Hey, if Charlton Heston did it,
It's got to be true.
it's got to be true. The snake that Moses threw down and ate all the other snakes. saying, our God is more powerful than yours. Our God is the true and living God. So if you need deliverance today, know that you serve the God that is able to deliver you. He's able to touch your heart. He's able to touch your mind. He's able to touch your soul. He's able to change your circumstances. If you'll let him. If you'll seek him. If you'll come to his door and knock and keep on knocking. If you'll seek him and keep on seeking him, you will come to know the delivering power of God. And he's wanting to deliver us. The main thing he wants to deliver us from is sin. He wants to deliver us from sin so that we can have a right relationship with him. We thank you, oh God, that you are the true God. And you show us every day by the power that you have, the power to give us life, the power to give us breath, the power to give us good thoughts, the power for us to become the children, the sons and the daughters of God because of the cross. We thank you and we praise you. And it's all in Christ's name we pray. Amen.